Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and I am joined once again by Mitchell Sellers. How are you doing, Mitchell?
Doing well. Glad to be back.
Cool, yeah. Glad to have you back. So, for the uninitiated, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to?
Yeah, so I am a 17-year now MVP and a person that lives in Visual Studio all day, every day, and love finding little nuggets about things. And here today to kind of share a few fun ventures through the settings world within Visual.
Awesome. I'm excited. Yeah, settings, it's one of those things that it's like a necessary evil. I feel like where you want to have the most customized experience in Visual Studio possible, but sometimes settings can be a lot going on, right? And also making sure that it syncs across.
Absolutely.
So is that what we're talking about today and then some?
Yes, exactly. Today, really, I'm focusing on. So, I'm a developer that works on multiple machines, and a lot of times your profile syncs over. I work with preview builds and other things. So sometimes settings get out of whack, and other things. I'm also looking at large projects or projects I'm not familiar with. So I'm looking at ways to make navigation easier within Visual Studio, make things more visible so that you can know how to do things, and really just talking about ways to improve that developer experience for productivity, navigation, and management. So kind of all is kind of the theme of the settings areas that I'm gonna poke around in today.
I think I'm most excited for the visibility aspects of it all. I personally just use all-in-one search to find anything because I couldn't tell you where half the stuff is just by going into
I mean,
tools.
honestly, that's a better option than what some people do. Uh, I've seen the developers that open Visual Studio Code to find something to
Oh,
in Visual Studio. Don't
wow.
recommend that. And that's exactly the kind of things here. And it's kind of fun, especially with the recent releases, right? Some of these
Mhm.
features, they get enabled if you click on the button when it first says, hey, there's this new thing. But if you don't click on the button, you forget about it and then you can't remember where to find it. And there's a couple of
Exactly.
those ones that are the really big things for me is like helping to find, some of those kinds of things is a really big developer benefit. And so kind of walk through that stuff. So
Great. Well, I'm ready to hop in if you are.
I'm ready to go.
Well, let's do it.
So one of the things that I find is from a developer is most of the things that I'm talking, everything I'm talking about today is available from the tools and options menu within Visual Studio. The options menu, as we all know, is a incredibly large environment where everyone's first instinct is I'm going to go search for what I'm looking for because I know I'm going to change this one thing. And I would encourage folks to actually navigate through based on the type of settings that are out there because that's how you end up uncovering a lot of these things, especially the nuggets that get dropped throughout the different releases and other things. And so again, I'm a developer that works with a lot of different organizations. So I'm logged into my multiple tenants and, DevOps and GitHub and other things. So one of the first things that I always kind of look at is in the environment section under accounts. There are some settings that exist in here that depending on how you log in and what you log in with first, if you log in with GitHub first, or if you log in with DevOps, sometimes you get different behaviors. There's a couple settings here that are often overlooked. And the most important one here is this one right here. Authenticate across all tenants when adding accounts. This box is selected by default when you log in with a Microsoft account. For those of us that are in multiple tenants, for example, my account is in, I believe, 13 tenants at the current time. That means that every time I get prompted for a login, I get 13 push notifications. And I go through that process of multi-factor, one after another. So if you get bogged down by that, this is the setting. This is that way to stop yourself from getting authenticated across everything. If you're in a single org, you're not going to necessarily care. But for those of us that are doing a lot of other things, definitely something that is worth taking a look at. Additionally, in the environment section, we have auto recover settings. And most of the time, I find that folks don't necessarily pay any attention to these settings, but there's two things, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing things, is the retention of how often it should save the auto recover information and then how long it keeps it for. And for those of us that are working from laptops, working remotely, working from locations where all of a sudden our battery may just die on us and we don't know, these things can be really, really valuable to help you not lose any of that work that you have. However, if we also do a lot with multiple projects, in certain days, I may have 5 or 6 instances of Visual Studio open, bouncing between projects. Backing that auto recovery time down for how long it saves it for can also benefit you in disk IO and some storage usage and everything else, especially if you're bouncing between projects. Because I found that sometimes you can get really confused with that. So a way to kind of help keep yourself a little bit more in tune to what's going on. Now, just to stay within the areas of environment, there's also preview features. And this is, I think, one of the areas that we all get different configurations that are turned on depending on what types of projects we're using, whether we click on the little banners that show up at the top of Visual Studio, or we do other individual things. Depending on the type of developer that you are, there's going to be different things in here that are going to be more or less valuable for you. For those of us that are doing things with .NET 9, working with WASM, Maui WASM, there's two things here that I do want to make sure to call attention to. These two items here for the new mono debugger in
Mhm.
.NET 9 for WASM and .NET 8.0.202 or later for Maui. These two settings provide a much better user experience from a debugging perspective if you are working with those types of projects. There's a bunch of other fun things in here that you may or may not have opened. Things that I've seen a personal real benefit with is the options for loading projects faster, which is one here, basically where it delays things. So instead of IntelliSense coming up as things go, the projects open up a little bit faster, really helps with large solution load times, and other things. The only one that I find in here to be cautious of, especially for those of us that may have a Visual Studio Preview installed alongside the mainline version of Visual Studio, is this setting right here of use previews of SDK. This is a removal of that prevention of using preview things without really getting that extra confirmation. So in my, main Visual Studio non-preview version, I don't have this box checked. So it is important sometimes to be aware of what you're doing because these preview features can definitely help improve your development life, but it's definitely something to just kind of stay up with. These seem to come in, and unless you may have even more information, but usually you're going to see the new features added here when there's a Visual Studio release. There'll be a note of like, hey, there's this new feature. You may want to go look because it may be something that's included in that bit. So I do encourage you after every update or so, I'm just coming here and take a quick look, see if there's anything interesting that you might want to add to your day-to-day experience.
Yeah, good point. This is a tab in tools options that I think can often be overlooked even by myself. Sometimes I forget that sometimes I need to go in there if I want to have certain features that I've heard tell about, but just don't see on by default. And yeah, it's really a case by case basis if we're going behind the scenes a little bit as to how Visual Studio and .NET work sometimes where just depending on how confident we're feeling about a particular feature, we may or may not turn something on by default. We may or may not choose to have it find a feature flag from the initial release, and then we kind of monitor it for a bit and turn it on later. It varies depending on the feature, but that's what's going on. I can give an example, the one on screen right now, like Extension Manager UI refresh. I worked on that a little bit before I changed teams, and yeah, with that one is a constantly updating feature right now, meaning that it's something that is still technically a work in progress. So that's mainly why it's kept under preview features, for instance. Like we still wanted to release it because there's still a lot of value in it, but it's also telling the user, hey, this is not the fully formed baby yet. And based off of group feedback and other things, it's just like
Exactly. And, like, the one for me that I always forget to enable are the 2 .NET, mono debuggers, and there's
Mhm.
similar things. If you look at some of the release notes and things from, the .NET team, there's notes that, "Hey, it may not work for everybody. This is a really early feature, but the experience that's improved is there." So, you know and that's why you have to go digging for it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It may not be safe for everybody, and I think that's the most important thing. You enable a feature, and then if all of a sudden you can't debug or debugging doesn't work, well, go turn off that setting that you just changed. So it
Right.
is something that, especially these preview features, make a change, go see what the impact is, and come back. And as one of the things as we get through a couple of these other ones here, I'll show you exactly that we can make the change. What's really nice is all of the settings, if they don't say requires restart after them, you make the change, you hit OK, the change applies. If it's one that requires a restart, you make the change, restart Visual Studio, and that change is there. So you know what to expect to validate and understand what you might be missing. And so as we kind of continue on towards productivity, the tabs and windows section under environment is the next area for me that is oftentimes everybody has set up just a little bit differently. And, there's different things in here that you may want to control depending on what you're looking to do. So in this case, we have where the tabs go and sortings. I think the two that really trip up developers differently, and this is all about how you work as a developer. Tabs sorted alphabetically versus most recently opened first or last is probably one of the more compelling settings of confusion. Alphabetical is great if you know the name of the file you're looking for, but you may not know what you're doing. So sometimes I do see developers like to change this around. Grouping by tabs and path. Um, the show tabs in multiple rows. This is a feature that came in a couple of major releases ago. Like, it's not new, but it's newer.
Yeah.
That
The
really
toggle part definitely is new. Yes, too. I don't know how many people know about that one.
Yeah, exactly, and as I said, you can toggle the behavior. The other thing that I see a lot of folks not adjust are the 2 settings here, the minimum and maximum tab widths. So, some projects, some solutions, your file names just inherently get a little bit longer. This is a way for you to say, I know that my file names are maybe a little bit ugly. So I'm going to adjust my environment to make that minimum tab width a little bit larger. Yes, I may span more rows. I may end up having other impacts, but I can take an opportunity here to kind of run with how I own some of the items. The other thing that is kind of key to that is the bold text on selected tabs. So these kind of give you all of those different behaviors. How and, do I want to have the close button on the document tabs? And just to give a little bit of a pointer from a visual perspective of what we're talking about here, you see here how we have the consistent max width of these individual tabs. And then things start to, this one fit, this one ended up having this in the middle. If I wanted to give myself more room here, maybe more rows, I can do it. And then the existence of this little close button here, that's controlled by that setting of showing close in tab in relation to the close that appears over off to the side as well. So definitely gives you some opportunity to clean up and control how you navigate a little bit. The other piece, environment wise, and these are things that are global settings. Um, we've all dealt with the task list. And I find that so many developers do not understand exactly what shows up in the task list. So,
I love the task list so much.
just as a refresher for anybody that is not necessarily used to or working with the task list, first and foremost, you get to it by view and task list. And in the task list, you can see items for the entire solution, your current project, etc. And it is going to bring up items based on the definitions and settings that you have in here. Most commonly, the defaults are hack, to do, undone, and then unresolved merge conflict. These are items that are maybe in a comment, whether it is in a HTML file, a CSS file, a C# file, does not matter. It's looking for the literal to do, all caps, all together, or hack altogether. I find sometimes that it's really valuable to put additional tokens in here if you have other things that you are looking to do. In some of our teams, we use, a temporary or pre-release or other things like that to be able to find items. Anything that matches will then automatically show up in that task list. So it
Yeah.
can leave a bunch of to-do comments or hacks. It's a really easy way for you to navigate. You don't need to use search. You have them just showing up in the whole
Mhm.
list. And so this
And you
setting
can redirect to where those comments are located too. It's just like
exactly. So like if I come in here and, if I add something in here, just as simple as to do and save, you'll see now that I had an editor update, which then has this in here. And so this is where we have all of these notes. And you can see here, like,
mhm,
I actually have, hey, I should write a blog about this.
yeah.
Probably should get done with that. That was a comment 4 years ago. But, it's a way for you to leave those notes in your project and potentially be able to look at what you might need to do, how you might work with your project in a way that isn't necessarily going out to, your ticketing system or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
I mean, you can manage that within your own team.
Also, if you're someone who likes to, do a lot of presentations or demos and stuff, personally, I added the demo keyword to my task list because I like to label locations in my code where I am probably going to demo something cool. So, just as a reminder to myself, I'll just, like, comment "demo XYZ," whatever it is I'm gonna present, and that
That is
lets me stay organized, so
that is awesome. And see, this is what's so great about the settings is everybody can use them for different purposes. So it's always fun to be like, hey, here's what I do. Here's what you do. So as we go further down here, the next things I'm going to kind of talk about just really quickly are around making that day-to-day developer experience a little bit better. And just want to touch on a couple more fun ones for navigating and working with your solutions. And so if we go to the projects and solutions section, there's a number of individual settings here that are related to projects and solutions as a whole. So this is doesn't matter if it's, ASP.NET Core or otherwise. The two big items that are newer items that aren't always enabled for folks are this one here, Track Active Item and Solution Explorer. So this is that scenario where you're going in and doing a bunch of review of your code and you're bouncing around, you're using go-to definition. Visual Studio is doing an awesome job, right? It's opening up the file, it's letting you see what you're looking for. But now you've got to do that task of like, where is this darn file in Solution Explorer? What this is going to do is if you are actively viewing an item, it is going to automatically scroll and or expand the Solution Explorer to the location of the item that you're in. Now, there's pros and cons to this behavior because sometimes, right, you want to look at a file and not have your Solution Explorer scroll around. But what this does, and you can see it really quickly here with the way that I have things done, I have my account controller class here selected, and that's my selected item indicated in Solution Explorer. When I go over to an entirely different file, which is a different project, really quickly you see that it moved around, it scrolled up the Solution Explorer and has that item still highlighted for me. So it really means, especially if you're exploring a project where you don't necessarily know the source code structure or where things might be, if you've used find in files or find all references and you've found what you're looking for, but you need to know where it is contextually, organizationally, a really good way to have that setting turned on to let Visual Studio help you out along the way. Related to that, there's also the setting for reopen documents on solution load. And this is one that has been on by default in Visual Studio, I think, since like the beginning of time, which is if I close out of Visual Studio now, I have all of these documents open. When I open Visual Studio back up, they're all going to come back open. That does impact startup time of Visual Studio. And depending on the size of your project, the number of files you have open, and the size of those projects, it is very possible that it's going to have a really large impact on your start time. So if you don't need that context, I would recommend potentially turning that off because it will definitely help you with save and start times. Same thing with restore solution explorer
Hierarchy.
project hierarchy state,
Yep.
because that's the same thing. It's all of, if you come back in and I close the studio, come back, all of my folders are exactly the way I left them, which is great, but there's definitely performance benefits to it. The basically the only two other places I wanted to go with was just around developer optimization under projects and solutions to kind of keep things quick and easy for everybody today. If you're an ASP.NET Core developer, one of the things that I see developers do all of the time is accidentally close their app when it's running, when they've done debugging with Visual Studio. You hit F5, your app opens, a little console window comes open, your browser opens, you're moving around. All of a sudden, I don't need this console window open. You close it, boom, your app is shut down. Well, most people seem to miss there is a setting under Project and Solutions, ASP.NET Core, Run Web Server In. The default setting here is external console. That opens it up in the console, the behavior that you're used to seeing. You can change this with a simple drop down to integrated terminal. When you do this, instead of that opening up into a new window, it's going to open up into the terminal inside of Visual Studio. So your odds of accidentally stopping the web app or having an outside interaction with it are definitely a lot lower. Really helps with productivity, especially if you've got a lot of things going on. Maybe you are doing some command line things to make things a little bit easier. Next area is around languages. And when we get into the individual language behaviors, you have a number of different settings that you can do within your individual languages for the text editor. So if I'm in here and I want to look at C sharp, I have a whole bunch of C sharp specific settings, right? I can adjust, the general behavior, scroll bars, tabs, etc. One of the newer things that it was introduced with Visual Studio is the scroll bar behaviors over here, where you can see a scroll bar can preview or it becomes a wide scroll bar. So as you see here with this project file, I have the wide scroll bar. If I mouse over here, I get a preview so I can quickly look at what I'm doing. But if you notice when I'm in here with my C sharp file, right now I'm not getting that behavior. That is driven by the text editor, C sharp, scroll bars, behavior. And if I move this to map mode with a medium, so I went from bar mode to map mode with the preview tooltip and a medium overview, what I'm able to do now is I will be able to see that preview just like I did with my solution file. Now I get it for my C sharp files, which makes navigation of large files, trying to find that place in something, quite a bit easier to get that peek and look forward. This is controlled though on an individual project type, file type basis. So depending on your default settings, some of those may or may not be done. And I have noticed that this is a setting that does not seem to transfer very far from one developer workstation to another. With one debugging tip and debugging nuance that I am sure everyone that's listening has probably ran into at some point in their developer experience, where you're working on a project, you are going in and you want to debug the project. You start your new instance, you have a breakpoint set, your project is going to launch, and you're going to start looking to see what's going on with something in your project. You want to mouse over something and you want to look at a value and you accidentally move away, and now that thing is gone and you completely lost your context. Or I'm going to come in here, I'm like, oh, I want to do this. Oh shoot, I didn't get where I was going. One of the things that you can do in options here is under debugging. So go in here, go to Debugging, General, and if we go a little bit down here, we are looking at this item right here. Keep expanded data tips open until you click away. For those of us that take screenshots, that are doing demos at conferences or otherwise, this is a huge game-changing feature. If I go now and restart debugging on this project, what we'll notice is that I'm able to get into my breakpoint, able to mouse over things. I can go over here, I can do whatever I want. It's not going to go away from me. Oh, gosh, I can't navigate correctly. I have to actually click somewhere else to get that window to go away. And that is something that for those of us bouncing between a lot of projects can be a real time saver, especially if you're trying to debug something with a really deep nested, expanding area of content. So
That's cool. I actually didn't know that one. Saying that as the person who used to work on the debugger team, I usually just, like, pin my tool tips when I want them around for a bit, but even then,
yeah,
that
it's
hasn't.
and it's so and this is the fun one. I didn't find that one until a couple weeks ago, and that's the biggest thing. I ran through just the first little bit here, right? And we try to keep these short. These are just some examples, right? Take a little bit of time. If you have something that annoys you, go find that section of the settings because there might be a setting that makes it do something that doesn't annoy you as much, is really, I think, the best way to put it. Because there's been those ideas and people have submitted them. We just don't know about them. We may not enable them. And so it's kind of fun sometimes to look at how can we improve productivity just by changing a few settings around.
Yeah, definitely do that. Definitely read, like, all the what's news that come out all the time because sometimes there's just, like, random new feature flags available that you should check out or experiment with, and also share your feedback on the developer community because that's how we get half of these settings in the first place. Because 'cause they're a grievance for somebody out there or multiple people out there. Yeah, also, I do wanna not to plug Copilot for the 80 billionth time, but I think Copilot's starting to get better about understanding the stuff that Visual Studio has to offer as well. I've used it in the past just to ask it questions along the lines of what feature can do this in Visual Studio, and it's starting to become a bit knowledgeable about that sort of thing, and letting me know what features are at my disposal or settings. So experiment with that too, would recommend.
That's a great idea. Well, yeah, that's what I have for everybody today. I hope it was helpful. Again, we could go on all day with the different settings and configuration options, but
Oh, yeah.
some of my
There's only scratching the surface on settings, I think. There's so many. The ones you did share are extremely helpful and are definitely worth using because it's like it's those minor things that just eat up time that starts to add up over time. Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll post any other related links and things in the description below if you're interested in some of the settings that we explored today. And once again, go to the developer community if there is a setting that you wish existed, but maybe we don't have yet. And I'm sure this won't be the last we see, Mitchell. So thanks again.
yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sweet. And thanks to all the viewers out there. Until next time, happy coding.